You ready? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parikacharya Ashtotar Dada Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parikacharya Ashtotar Dada Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. So I suspect we may have different people setting this up. There's my book right there. I can see the marker. Can we trade? Hare Krishna. Give him the book. That was you, huh? Okay, so yeah, you look for this one with all the. All right, not a problem. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 30th day of June 2021 in San Diego, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are continuing in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. And we're going to be doing texts 8 to 12, beginning on the bottom of 537. Now, there's a big purport here. We're going to take probably another day at least to go through it after today. And before we begin, the title of tonight's presentation is Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness, Part 5. Exploring the 20 Elements of Transcendental Knowledge, Part A. Okay. Yeah, bottom of page 537. So we'll just go through the Sanskrit once and then I'll read the English translation and go back to the purport where we were. Amanitvam adambhitvam ahimsa chantararjavam acharyopasanam shaucham staryam viningraha indriyartheshu vairagyam anahankara evacha janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanudarshanam asaktirna vishvanga putra dara grahadishu nityam cha samachittatvam ishtanishtopapatishu mahichananda yogena bhaktirabhyavicharini vivikta desha sevitvam aratir janasangsadi adhyatma jnana nityatvam tattva jnana artha darshanam eta jnanamati proktam ajnanam yadatonita. Translation: humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, says Krishna, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. So we began this purport yesterday, and we went through the first two paragraphs. So we're going to start at the bottom of page 539 and move through and do some more of the qualities of these 20 very important qualities. Non-violence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body. But actually, non-violence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material concept of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people, so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is non-violence. Tolerance. Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlad, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. Excuse me. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlad tolerated him. So there may be so many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination. Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles, or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. All right, we'll stop there for now. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So, as always, we like to put things in context. And this is Krishna is systematically answering Arjun's question, which had 6 parts. Arjun wanted to know, what is Prakriti, what is Purusha? Prakriti means nature, material nature. And Purusha is the living entity who is also constitutionally Prakriti, but is acting like a Purusha, is acting like a enjoyer of this world, imitating Krishna. So that's the first question. What is Prakriti and what is the Purusha? What is the Chaitra and the Chaitragya? Now Chaitra means field in Sanskrit. And in this context it means the body, the bodily field of action. We have, Krishna also analyzes it, we have 10 senses. Normally we say, well, I have 5 senses. Yes, we have 5 senses of acquiring knowledge. They're called Gyanendriya, senses that give you knowledge of the outside world. Commonly we can, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the touch, the sense of all these different senses that come. So those are called the knowledge acquiring senses. But then you also have active senses. You have the voice, you have the hands, you have the feet, reproductive organs, excretory organs. These 5 are how we act on the world. For the devotee, and practically for everyone, the most important of those active senses is the voice, because the voice conveys knowledge, and so many things. Conveys emotion. The voice is really an essential sense, active sense, and of course the hands and the feet. You do things with those. All of the senses are important. So this is all part of Prakriti, nature, and it also is part of the Chaitra. There's some overlap here. The Chaitra, or the body, which has gross and subtle elements to it. We have our gross body that we can see in the mirror. Everyone knows what we call the body. But in the Vedic understanding, there's also what we call the subtle body, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego. And those, when you think about it, those are really where you live. Something may be happening in your body, but if you're so absorbed in some activity, you might not even realize it. You may get some injury and not realize it until you quiet down and say, oh my God, I pulled my muscle or something like that. So the mind is really the key. And we learn later on that in the process of transmigration of the soul, it's the subtle body that survives, that carries the soul to the next gross body. The gross body, as everyone knows, disintegrates. It gets buried or it gets thrown in the ocean, whatever. But the subtle body, which has a record of all of your desires and activities that you performed in that lifetime, plus from previous lifetimes, that's the template upon which your next gross body develops. There's a tremendous organization to the universe. There's all of these higher beings, the demigods and Krishna himself, the super soul, who are watching over us. The super soul is giving us intelligence so we can do what we want to do, and giving us memory and forgetfulness as well. And the different gods are also in the final mix. They're going to provide our next body, guide us to just the right body, so we can continue try to fulfill our unfulfilled desires and fulfill our karma. It's a very complex machine, actually, bureaucracy, if you will. So this is all part of Arjun's question. What is this Chaitra, this field, both growth and subtle? What is the living entity who knows this field? Chaitra Gya. Gya means knower. And then, the most important aspect of it, what is knowledge and what is the goal of knowledge? In other words, it's not just knowledge for knowledge's sake. What is the goal of all this knowledge? Now, in the materially, someone goes to college, he has a goal, I want to become this, and then overall, the goal is basically to exploit nature, to adjust nature in such a way that we can enjoy. And there's also an aspect to it of trying, philosophy and things, what's the meaning of life. But without access to this kind of knowledge, they're just speculating, and they're never going to get to the real end of it, which we'll find in this chapter. Now here Krishna, we've already studied Prakriti, Purusha, Chaitra, Chaitragya, and now we're studying what is knowledge. These 20 aspects of knowledge that we did in text 8 to 11. So let's now explore the ones that we read today. First, starting with nonviolence. Now, Prabhupada started with humility and pridelessness. Now, just to let you know, this is amanitvam and adambitvam. So, mana means pride. Many of us know this verse. We can chant it together. Trinadapi sunichena, tarodapi sahishnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniyak sadahari. Who wrote that verse? Who wrote it? Lord Chaitanya. And Prakash is going to tell us what it means. Kind of lost a little poem there. That's okay. Yeah, I'm not going to give the poem. So Srimad is a little blade of grass. This is the standard for humility. What can be more humble than that? You know. And then there's the tolerance of the tree. When you think how tolerant a tree is, I mean, now in the northwest, Vancouver, 120 degrees, 120 degrees in Vancouver. Are you kidding me? You know, and the trees, they're suffering from it, you know. Of course, people are all, I mean, they have people die from that already today. It's insane. But extremes of temperature and all kinds of things, the woodsman comes and cuts the tree down. You can't complain. So the tree is the emblem for tolerance. So Prabhupada, actually, he emphasizes in the purport here, tolerance of the subtle injuries. In other words, one may be able to tolerate physical pain. You know, you can build that up. But if someone insults you, that can hurt even more, isn't it? Especially if someone, your loved one, you know, someone who you're close to insults you. So that's a very important part of tolerance, both gross and subtle. So humility is the first one, and adamba. Now I pointed out yesterday that this adamba has these two meanings. One is pride, you know, freedom from pride, you know, pridelessness. But damba also means hypocrisy. Damba. This is adambitvam. One should be free of hypocrisy. In other words, be honest with oneself and honest with others. That's very important. Because especially in spiritual matters and all these different things which are mysteries for most people, it's very easy to exploit innocent public. And we've seen that. You know, people come and pretend to be God. You call them God, you know, Bhagavan so-and-so, Bhagavan so-and-so. And it's just a big scam. And Prabhupada showed he never did that. You know, he certainly didn't come for money. I mean, he came, he had $12, if that, coming from India at an advanced age. I mean, he could have just stayed in Vrindavan and chanted Hare Krishna like all his God brothers. You know, it's a natural thing to do. There's no shame in it. Except he had the instruction from his spiritual master to try to spread Krishna consciousness in the West, you know. So he came for that, and when he had a chance, now he started with nothing, and at a certain point he had literally thousands of people ready to do his beck and call, and he had access to literally millions of dollars. But he never changed his schedule. He always get up at 12 at night and write his, you know, keep writing the books, flying around and at advanced age with failing health. That's certainly not, you know, selfish. In other words, he always kept the same mood of giving, and Prabhupada talks about in this nonviolence section, of real nonviolence is not just not hurting anyone, you know, that's part of it, but more important is helping others who are suffering. In other words, there's something called criminal negligence. I gave you this example once. You're walking outside here going toward Cass, and you know somebody stumbles into the street and gets hit by a car, and they're writhing on the pavement there. If you just like ignore them and go back, that's actually a crime. If, you know, you got your cell phone in your pocket, and practically everyone has. You could easily call 911, but you don't want to get involved, you know. So that's an extreme example. But devotees realize that everybody is in an emergency situation. Because as we read, one of the parts of knowledge is Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Doshanu, Darshanam. Who knows what that means? Raise your hand. Or raise your hands. Go ahead, Alex. Yes. Dosha means a fault or an evil in this case. And Darshanam is to, Anudarshanam means to not forget it. In other words, to make this a central part of your consciousness. Because it's a reality. Whatever you try to build up in this world in terms of name, fame, knowledge, family, money, whatever it may be, is all lost at the time of death. Now it only has meaning, you know, or some meaning anyway, if we don't live again, if there's no transmigration. But that's the A of the ABC of spiritual knowledge. Krishna teaches it first to Arjuna, and he starts teaching in text 11 of chapter 2, right? Ashochan avashoches tvam. You're lamenting for what is not worthy of grief. You're lamenting that, I'll be killing my relatives and friends, Nobody dies. And this is one of the great revelations. Isn't that gospel means good news? Good news. Nobody dies. But so I made a little poem out of this. You have to realize it, because I'm an editor. There's a space between every and body. Every body dies, nobody dies. Wake up and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and achieve life's goal, attain life's goal. So that's very, when you think about Prabhupada's teachings, there's so much of that. Hey, you're going to die. So why work so hard to achieve temporary things that are simply attached to this body which is going? And you're going somewhere else. Krishna is taking it all away. So don't be a fool. You should work for assets that you can take with you. So what can you take with you? Nothing material, but your spiritual assets you take with you. And we can prove it by the verse that Alex is going to give us from the 2nd chapter. We need some systematic verse memorization. This is a very important verse in chapter 2. Neha brukkamanashosti pratyavayo navidyate svopamapya siddharmasya trayate mahato bayat. He says in this endeavor of Krishna consciousness, there's no loss and there's no diminution. Now normally the loss comes when you die, right? And the diminution comes as you approach death. You really can't, whatever you have, you really can't use. But there's no loss or diminution. How is that possible? Because the assets you accrue from Krishna consciousness are adhering to the soul. This is and to the subtle body. Don't forget, the subtle body doesn't die. So if you have pretty good remembrance of Krishna, you may not go back to Godhead, but you'll be born in a family where you can continue to remember Krishna, where you can take it up. That's right in the 6th chapter also, Krishna describes. So, and then he says something very, very important. Svalpam. Alpa means a little bit. Svalpa means su-alpa, means a very little bit of advancement on this path. Protects you from the greatest, most fearful type of danger. That we know. Tapas, what's the most dangerous thing that we face? Yeah, you see, I didn't even hear what he said, but I know he got it right. I have trouble hearing him without the mask. And he's wearing that very high quality mask where no one can, believe me, no one can hear you. Yeah, to lose the human form of life. In other words, when you study this Vedic knowledge, you get a much larger perspective of what our destiny is. I mean, as soon as you understand, hey, I had so many lives before, and I'll have so many lives in the future, you realize you take this life in perspective. And you realize it's very clear that we've come up through the species. There's 8,400,000 of what we call species. Then I don't know if it's the same exact thing as the Western count. But the idea is there's all these different varieties of life. Everyone knows that. So every single variety of life, every ant, every blade of grass, every tree, every beast, every whale, there's all a spirit, soul in there, just like ours, called the Atma. Right? That's the first teaching. But there's obviously a great variety of bodies due to a great variety of states of consciousness. And so we've been through all of them. We don't know how many times. By Krishna's mercy, we've forgotten. I don't think anyone here remembers, right? Alex may remember. He's pretty smart. But that's Krishna's mercy. Can you imagine if you remembered all that? All those times when you thought you were doing okay, then you died, you got this disease, somebody shot you, you were a bug, you got stepped on. I mean, there's something. Mercifully we forget. But still, there's in there. So now we've come to the human form of life, which is very, very special because of the big brain. We have a higher intelligence. We can contemplate these things. We can do things. We can act in such a way, if we take the right instruction, to escape this round of birth and death, this samsara chakra, which is not at all pleasing. Maya or illusion's trick is to try to trick you into thinking that, the famous says, I'm good. You know, so you try to give someone a book, probably, right? I'm good. And then Vijay's answer, but you could be better, right? But they're not really good. They're completely an illusion. There's nothing good here. I mean, in the material sense, if it seems to be good, that's danger. You know, we should say that's the danger sign should go off. Because Maya is trying to lull you into thinking that everything is okay, there's no urgency. There's a tremendous urgency for chanting Hare Krishna, performing these practices, accruing as much spiritual credit as we can in this lifetime, and hopefully going back to guided. But who knows how long we really have? I read this kind of sobering statistic, because you know, as soon as I came here, I came from Miami back in '89. And Miami, the whole thing is, you know, hurricanes. And there's a certain hurricane season from, July through October, something like that. And so as soon as that comes, you know, everyone starts to be very concerned with the weather report. You know, I mean, is there something brewing up in the Caribbean that we should be concerned about, you know, like that. So, but, you know, you get some warning. And if it really starts to bear down on you, well, you batten the hatches, you know, you go inland, whatever, you know. But that's one kind of misery that you can have, right? This is called the adidaivik. It's the acts of nature. But there's others, obviously. Like we've had this now some of them seem to overlap. Like, what is the pandemic? Well, it's kind of adidaivik because it's come from nature, you know. But once you have it, it's adhyatmic. It's your own body which is giving you all this trouble, isn't it? I mean, anyway, there's all these difficulties. And at any time, I mean, this whole horrible thing that happened in Miami Beach, where I used to live, right? One of these condos that collapsed, you know, in the middle of the night, just shocking, you know. I mean, no one's expected that. And suddenly it happens. And so we don't know how long we have. That's my point. And we have this valuable human life in which we can inquire into these things. What is that verse? I would love to quote this verse. There's several like this in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Labdva sudurlabamidam bahusam bhavante manushyam artadam anityam apiya dhira turnam yateta nabateda namritya yavat nikshe yasaya vishaya kalasarvatakshat. That verse is just packed with knowledge. So the first thing said, labdva, you've attained, it's very difficult to attain, human form after many, many births. Labdvas sudurlamam idam bahusam bhavante. That means many verse. Manusham. You could even hear the echo of the English. Manusham, the man, human, like that. Artadam, very important word. It means that only in the human form can you achieve the ultimate goal of life. Arta is a word that means something of value. In certain contexts, it means money or something like that. But in this context, it means the ultimate valuable thing, which is breaking out of the round of birth and death and going back to our eternal life in the spiritual world, which never ends and is full of bliss and knowledge. Compare our present life, you know. It certainly ends. It's not full of bliss. There's maybe a little happiness here and there. And we're ignorant of so many things. Full of ignorance. So it's, what is it? Instead of Sat Chit Ananda, it's Asat, Achit, and Nirananda. That's the state we're in now. So, human life, if we use our brains, get the right knowledge, and act on it, we could actually purify our consciousness, come to a state where our next death is our last one. That's the goal. So that's the goal of knowledge that will be explained later. So, going back to our purport. So the first element is humility, because that's how you have to approach the authorities who can give you knowledge. That's also mentioned here. Acharya. Acharya Upasanam, to worship the Acharya. One has to recognize, I can't, with my present senses in mind, I can't figure this out on my own. There's no point in speculating here and there, or to hear from someone whose understanding of all of this is a result of his own speculation, such as Western philosophers. You know, they're big brains. I mean, there's no question they have a tremendous intelligence, but there's only so much you can do with your limited brain and your limited intelligence, because so much of this is beyond the reach of our senses and mind, which is the definition of transcendental. So Krishna comes to give this knowledge. The great thing is that we're not alone. Krishna is with us within the heart, and he cares, because we're his eternal children. He claims us that way. I expand myself as all these living entities. Why? To engage in loving pastimes with us eternally. But that means we have to have a certain amount of freedom. Prabhupada famously said, Krishna doesn't want us to love him at the point of a revolver. That's not love, you see? So he's given us a certain amount of freedom, which we, unfortunately, in this material world have misused. And we've fallen from grace. I mean, the Bible has some interesting thing. The Adam and Eve, it kind of means that, falling from the land of Eden. But how to get back there? So the human form. So if we get the proper source of knowledge, and we incorporate that knowledge into our lives properly, we can progress on our way back to Godhead. That's the whole idea. Yes, Alex.
This is somewhat. I mean, it's in the purport. So Prabhupada says that the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. But he also says that because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles.
It would make him what?
Immediately advanced without the disciples.
Yes. That's a little mysterious, yeah.
I was wondering if you could expand on that.
This is your question. Okay. All right, let me just find that. Where is that? At the top of page 540? Simplicity. Okay. So, immediately advanced without disciples following the regulative principles. So, it means that just to get the idea and the determination to start the process is a significant... Ladies here. No, you can come. No, you can't sit there because you have to sit with the ladies. This is the ladies' side. And if you would move over, Prabhu, we have. You're gonna usually come regularly, right? Because we'll make plans. We'll leave a space for you. You never know. We may actually have two someday. I think Hina's is doing something else for a while. Okay. So, as soon as you are inspired a little bit to follow, even if you're not following yet, you may be performing all 4 sins, illicit sex, toxic gambling, but you have the idea that you want to progress. You start chanting a couple of rounds, whatever it is. That's what Prabhupada says is immediately advanced compared to everybody else who is in complete darkness, and then he says, or the regular principle will be easy for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation. So that's kind of a big leap from, that's quite a progression from, if he bestows blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advance. So disciple, I think, is being used in a more general sense here, because the way ISKCON developed, you can't be a disciple unless you're following the 4 regular principles, in the formal sense. But you can be a follower. You can be someone who's serious about Krishna consciousness. There's a certain arc, of development, and so if one gets inspired, and inspired means to get some blessings. These books are full of blessings. If one reads them with a little bit of sincerity and submissiveness, that means he's getting the blessings. Prabhupada's blessings in the form of all these words and encouragement. These books are not simply speculative books of philosophy. There's a whole bunch of shoulds in here, where you're not going to find that. In other words, it's normative. It's meant to guide your activity, your behavior. And so if you start even doing it for a small amount of time, then you're getting the blessings, and it's a big step forward compared to the rest of the world. But how far and how fast we want to go, that's up to us, depending on our sincerity.
So my understanding is that immediately advanced just means getting enough faith to start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then if you get more blessings, you'll be able to actually follow the principles. It'll be easier. Go ahead.
So animals have a lower consciousness. Their consciousness is covered, right? So their subtle body cannot fully manifest, or that's why they, even though, like, let's say a person has like a human body and they have a higher, like they have higher intelligence, and so since their consciousness is covered, their intelligence is also covered, or their mind?
It's more rudimentary. I mean, the thing is, they have skills. Prabhupada would point out certain, amazing skills of creatures. Like I remember he talks about the vulture, who can fly so high. I mean, like 5 miles or whatever, And they have tremendous eyesight. They can look down. They can find a carcass down there that they're looking for something to eat, and then they can dive down there and get it. So they have this. They're very qualified. They can fly so high, which we can't do. Tremendous eyesight. But what's the purpose? Just to eat a carcass. So and there's so many skills. Everyone knows the dogs can smell so much. They can even smell if you have COVID. You know that? I mean, seriously. Yeah. But they can't chant Hare Krishna. They can't understand the philosophy. They don't know who they are. They're limited. So we've come through those species, and we still have some of the tendency. In fact, you find people acting just like animals. The more that you deny the spiritual dimension, the philosophical dimension, asking questions about the ultimate purpose of life, and simply live to satisfy the senses, the more animalistic you are. And you can easily get an animal's body. So there's danger. Ignorance is a tremendously dangerous thing. So that's why the books of knowledge Prabhupada gave, they're actually urgently needed. And any book distributor has that mood. Wow, this book can save people's life, and sometimes they literally save the life. Someone's about to commit suicide and have a little book put on. What's that story? You've heard of it? Yes. Was it here in San Diego? Someone is in the midst of committing suicide in the parking lot with the tailpipe hooked up into his window, right? And then the devotee book distributor comes up, please take this book. He said, get out of here. So he said, all right. So he puts it on his windshield. Because sometimes you get more money, you can give books away. And I said, I'll put it on his windshield, some small book. So he's waiting for the carbon monoxide to take effect, and he's looking at the cover of the book, on his windshield. That's kind of interesting, So he rolls down the window, which itself is life-saving, and he gets the book, he starts reading it, and he decides not to commit suicide. He comes to the temple. Did he become a devotee? I think he got initiated. Anyway, that's a graphic example. You must have heard this, Pez. He's told that story. Yeah, it's a famous story. But in practically in all kinds of ways, the books save your life. If you're leading just an ordinary sinful life, and you get the books and you become inspired to get on a website now or visit a temple and pursue it, it can be a tremendously life-changing experience. Just to read a few words in Prabhupada's books. So that's the potency of this knowledge. We're ignorant, we're suffering because of that ignorance. And because we're human beings, we can understand this knowledge, and if we're fortunate enough to act on it, we can be benefited. So
Prabhu, what about beings in the spiritual world? Like, are they like trees, cows, and all that? They are just playing horsey, or how do we consider them?
Yes, they're all fully conscious. They're much more conscious than we are. Otherwise, why do you have these trees, kalpavriksha trees, that can give any fruit that you like at any time for any amount? They're responding to you. They're fully conscious, but they're happy serving in that role. Krishna's. I mean, read the 10th canto. There's the gopi songs of Krishna as he's entering the forest. And they're at home doing their duties, and they're thinking of him, and their minds run after him. It's described at the beginning of the chapter. Beautiful pastime. So it describes like this. What are the verses? They're in pairs. 2 verses go like this. Anucharaisam anavarnata virya adipura shihibachala bhuti vanacharogi ditateshita dande venanabhayati gasi yadahi Vanalatastadava atmani vishnum vyanjayandi vapushpa paladya panatabada vatapamadudara prema rishtatanabhoba vishusma. Now, you have to be deaf not to feel the beat on that one. He's even beating his hand, see? So this is the gopis. They're churning in time, So what are they saying? This is 2 of a whole bunch of prayers. Chapter 35 in the 10th canto, just check it out. So they're saying, oh, Krishna's companions, they're singing his glories in very beautiful songs. Anucharai Samanavarananta Virya is powerful. Adi Purusha, and they say, oh, he's just like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, surrounded by his many energies. They don't think he is God, but he's like them. Adi Purusha Vachalabuchi. Vanacharo, they were going through the forest, and on the side of the mountain, Giri Govardhan, and Krishna is playing on his flute to call the cows. He can actually sing their names through his flute sound. It's amazing. Now, so what's the response? They're going into the forest. The trees and the creepers, they become ecstatic that Krishna's now in the forest. And they start blossoming their fruits and their flowers, like all of a sudden. We've all seen that time-lapse photography, where you can see, how, over a period of weeks. So this happens instantly. Suddenly they're full of flowers and fruits. And they're bowing down. The new weight, of all those fruits and flowers causes them to bow down. The honey is flowing down from their branch. Oh, no, the sweet sap is coming down, like tears. So this forest is a very important servant of Krishna. And there's one, forgive me, but I have a few minutes. There's a beautiful play by Rupa Goswami called Vidagdha Madhava. And it describes, Krishna is describing how the forest of Vrindavan is pleasing him as he enters into it. There's a reciprocal thing going on there. Sugandhau Makanda Pakadamakadandasya Madade Vinisyande Vandi Kutamadabhavrindam Muhudidam. Kutan, now before I complete this verse, you have to realize Sanskrit is such a refined language. Certain combinations of letters are meant to produce certain reactions in your heart, The ND combination is meant to evoke like bliss, like in the word Ananda or Nandanandana, like that. So you have to listen for these NDs now in this verse. There's about 12 of them. Sugandhau Makanda Pakadamakadandasya Madure Vinisyande Vandi Kutamadabhavrindam Muhudidam Kutando Lanmando Natabinanalais Chandanagere Mamanandam Avrinda Vipanamatulam Tundalayati. You hear all those ends? Our guest is into it. Now, what does it mean? So Sugandhau means very fragrant, beautiful fragrance. Of what? Of the blossoms growing on the mango trees. Who knew? The mango is so sweet, but the blossoms are also very, fragrant. So there's some nectar. Actually, look up in the dictionary the word nectar. One of the meanings is the little liquid in flowers that is sweet that attracts the honey to come and get it and then make it into honey. So it's overflowing with this nectar that's attracting honeybees. So Sugandho Makanda is the mango tree. Pakada Makadandasya. There's so many blossom. Madure, the sweet honey, sweet nectar trickling from the mango blossoms is attracting swarms of honeybees who are becoming vandis. Now, vandi is a Sanskrit word that means an English word that you also don't know. Panegyrist. Does anyone know what that means? No. A professional praiser. Who knew? Like in the days of the kings, they'd have courtiers come, and they'd be skilled at writing poems and things, all about the king's glories. So when he wakes up, he doesn't wake up to some alarm clock, He wakes up to them singing his glories, So they're called panegyrists. They're paid in the court. So anyway, the bees are becoming panegyrists. They're also starting to sing, but they're not just humming. Bzz. They're singing stotras and poems about Krishna. Vinisyande Vandi Krita Madupa, those who drink the honeybees. Vrindam Mahudidam. And then the breeze coming down from the Malaya hills, which is very fragrant with sandalwood, that's causing the creepers and everything to dance, But the breeze is cooling and it's fragrant. So you got that fragrance also. Kutando Mando Natabit Analais Chandanagade. The breeze is good. And in this way, Mamanandam, my bliss is increasing more and more as I enter this forest of Vrindavan. That's just one verse. So this is what they're describing the forest. The forest is fully conscious, everything about it. And it's all geared toward pleasing Krishna. And they become pleased by pleasing Krishna. Go ahead. And
I had one brief question about the Sanskrit word, and it was the very last word in the text on page 538.
Anyata.
And if we look at the definition, it shows there's an A And so I've had this question for a couple of days of why we see apostrophes before a word, and I haven't actually got a sufficient answer to it.
That's a very good question. I think I can answer that question. So the word began, as you saw, look in the word by word meaning, through anyata. So we lost an A, and this is what that little apostrophe means. I think it's in a vagraha. And in Sanskrit, there's something called sandhi. Sandhi means where two things meet. And like there's three sandhyam for every day, where the morning time, where the day meets the night, noon, where the morning meets the afternoon, and then at evening time is another sandhi. So it's called three sandhyam. We sing the Guru Vashtaka, right? At the last verse. How's it go? Yasya prasadan bhagavat prasado, yasya prasadan nagati kutopi, dhyayam stubam satsya yashastri, sandhyam, vande guru shri charanarabindam. So 3 times a day, that's in the sandhyas. Morning, noon, and evening, we should remember the Guru and glorify him. That's what that says. So now when two words meet, what is the word? Ataha, look at the last 2 words in the word by words, way down. Ataha and anyata. You see that? I know, that's a part of the sandhi. In other words, the H, there's a whole bunch of rules, which I don't know much, hardly any of them, but I know that the H with a dot under it, that turns into an O when the next word begins with a vowel, which is, in this case, A. And that A is lost. That is deleted. That's why that apostrophe is there. So you can understand what the word is. It's anyata. And it's all for the facilitation of the smooth chanting. Anganam yadatonyata. Otherwise, yadatak anyata. You see how, wouldn't work. So there's a whole bunch of rules, and it's a perfect language. Sanskrit means perfectly composed.
This helped remind that this is a song we're listening to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Should we go on?
Sorry, just one thing.
One more.
Is this an example of sandhis where it's what's the line? Tyajet yanti kalevaram.
How's it go?
Tyajet yanti yante kalevaram, where it's
where the I becomes a Y.
Yeah, and then it kind of,
yes.
Okay.
That's another thing. If the next word begins with a vowel and the previous word begins with ends with an I, that I becomes a Y. And really you sound it at the beginning of the next word, which a lot of devotees don't pick up yet. I think we should have probably a Sanskrit pronunciation class. And not only pronunciation, but meter, the varieties of meter. There's literally hundreds of them. There's a few dozen that appear again and again and again. And they add so much to the aesthetics. It's one thing to say Krishna was going into the forest. I mean, it's nice, and the gopis were singing to him. But they had, Vama Baha Kata Vama Kapolo, Balgita Badadada. And then you have the Goswamis who are adding poetry. I mean, literal rhymes. Inna Nila Mani Mandalavana, Pullani Pukasamanchitakana, Krishna Labadakashora Sihari Sundaro, Jayati Kundi Bihari. And then you have Dravida comes along and tries to put it into English. His smooth complexion conquers sapphires, stunning to the eye. Kadamba blooms with fragrance full on each ear gently lie. His beauty's greatened by his chest where Gunja necklace stays. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. So this is Ashtaka. I sing it every day. And it's a nice meditation. Never gets old. Like all those pop songs. Yeah. And here's one more, and then we have to maybe adjourn a little bit. So this came up. Who was I telling this to? I think I was telling it to Raj. Yeah. Back in, I don't know how many years ago now it was, Radhanath Swami, he loves to glorify devotees, which is a real sign of how advanced he is, So I was in LA. I used to spend more time up there for book production. And he was there giving a class. It wasn't an ordinary class. One of his disciples had passed away. He was an elderly gentleman who had been staying in Chowpatty in Bombay for quite a few years. His name was Abhiram Thakur Das. And he would take care of the brahmacharis. They would go out, and when they would come back, he'd make sure they have what they need and prasadam, and stuff like that. And he would do other chores during the day, and he was always singing the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was very Krishna conscious, and everyone loved him. So I happened to be there. I was amazed. He went on for 2 hours, this class, in glorifying this devotee. And I happened to be working on a certain verse, a poem, that seemed to fit this devotee perfectly, about always chanting and hearing and being very blissful and like that. And I wasn't quite finished with it, but then I don't know, a month later or so, I was in Vrindavan. I used to get to go to Vrindavan every year in Kartik. And he was there with the devotees, and they were doing the last rites thing. They had his ashes, and they were going to put him in the Yamuna and everything. I couldn't go because I had a meeting. But I said, can you please chant this verse, as part of the ceremony? And I gave it to him. And so here's the verse that I had written. It's in the Pradyavali, and you can hear the Sanskrit poetry. Aho aho bir nakale vaduyate sudha sudhara modadam pade pade dine dine chandana chandra shitalam yasho yashoratana yasagiyate. Because at every step they drink a flood of wondrous nectar sweet, whose cooling power sandal paste enhanced with camphor can't defeat. They feel as if the raging blaze of Kali's days had ne'er begun. How blessed are they who fill their days with praise of Shri Yashoda's son. And so that filling your days with glorification of Krishna is pretty much what Krishna consciousness is all about. Either you're doing it directly or you're, helping to do it in various different ways. So this verse really describes how devotees, and we realize this whole pandemic, how so many devotees all over the world, largely because of the internet, they were able to still associate and have so many programs and classes and kirtans even, that were able to tolerate this, unlike so many thousands of others who just being locked down and, and so frightening and depressing and anxiety and all of the different things. When you're chanting and you're fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, you can transcend a lot of difficulty. And you really appreciate, that part of the value of Krishna consciousness, what part of others. So that's what ultimately this movement is all about. Always glorifying Krishna, body, minds, and words, and staying connected in that way in the association of devotees, emphasizing, chanting the holy name, which is the great panacea for the age, and going back to Godhead, when we'll all be able to see each other's spiritual body. Can you imagine? I'm not going to try to guess who you are, so don't worry about it. But I have some perspective. All right, so we have one more minute, so I'll give you one nice upbeat verse. This is a prayer. Did you want to ask a question? All right. So this is a prayer. You find so many prayers in the writings of the Goswamis, and most of the time they're prayers for love of Krishna. That's what we should really pray for, So this is a beautiful prayer. Pujanga de Puchandaka Spurada Kandachu Dankure Nirankshadraganchala Brahmina Badna Bringa Brahme Patanga tu hitustati Vanukuti de Keli Prihe Padaspuratu me Mahostwai Mukunda Shuddharati. Shuddharati, pure devotion, pure love. You wear the best of crests, a crown of perfect peacock plumes. Your dancing glances stun the bees meandering midst the blooms. You relish love play in a cottage by Kalindi's shore. O Krishna, may pure love for you be mine forevermore. So you're all welcome to that. I can give you a PDF, or I can just teach it to you live, and then you can offer it to Krishna. Pray to Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.